video, we're going to wrap up Unit 3 by looking at some of the cost curves. So the first thing to understand is fixed cost versus variable versus total. And these are pretty straightforward if you watch the previous video and you understand fixed and variable inputs. Fixed costs are those from fixed inputs, and variable costs are those from variable inputs. So we'd usually say things like wages and then rent for land and capital. And total cost equals fixed cost plus variable cost. So now let's take a look at the average or the per unit costs curves here. And the one thing that I've kind of left off here that we talked about already in the previous one was marginal cost. And that one's actually pretty important. So we're going to show this on the graph here, marginal cost, but notice that it's not described here. What is ATC? ATC is average total cost, and it's equal to the total cost divided by the quantity of output. And it's U-shaped because of rising costs increasing faster than the rate of increasing output. In other words, diminishing marginal returns is the reason why. Average variable cost. One more thing here. We would say ATC is equal to AFC plus AVC. We're going to look at that in a second. Average variable cost is equal to the variable cost, the total amount, divided by the quantity of output. And it is also U-shaped because of the same reasons as above. We'd say diminishing marginal returns means that this quantity of output, right, that amount is not going to rise as quickly as variable cost. It will variable cost versus output. Initially, you're going to see that they'll kind of start to specialize, and the workers will start to specialize, and they'll get lots more output. And that's why it'll start to go down. And then it'll start to go back up again because of diminishing marginal returns. AFC is average fixed cost, and that is just fixed cost divided by quantity of output. And we'd say it's L-shaped because of the spreading effect. We are spreading out the output over more, over the same fixed cost. Actually, this is backwards. Spreading out the fixed cost over more output. So that's actually maybe a better way to say it, because the fixed cost isn't going to change, but we're going to keep getting more and more output. So now we're going to draw a graph showing these curves and marginal cost. So this is just a basic cost curve graph. We've got quantity and price. And the first one is marginal cost, and I drew that in the previous video. And that is the same as the supply curve for the firm for the most part. Now it goes down and then hits its bottom and then comes back up again. It goes down again because of worker specialization, right? And then it starts to come back up again because of diminishing marginal returns. Now AVC is going to come down, hit its minimum right here, and then come back up again. ATC is going to come down, hit its minimum, come back up again. Now, technically, they're going to get closer and closer together. And that's because the vertical distance between these two is AFC, right? The AFC, if we were to graph it, would just look like that. And it would start to get closer and closer, maybe to the x-axis. So that's kind of the way to think about some of these graphs. That minimum point is really important if we're going to talk about something there. It really has to hit at the minimum right there. Now we're going to look at the LRATC, which is kind of a related idea, and I'm going to try to be as quick as I can with my explanation here. It says draw an LRATC graph and label economies constant and diseconomies. And so in general, say you've got this quantity and then the dollar value, and it comes down, hits a bottom, and then comes back up again. That's an LRATC. And it's actually made up of lots of individual, right, short-run average total cost curves, which is just this curve up here. And so what it represents is all the possible all of the possible short-run existences. This is like the long-run curve that kind of shows you the big picture. And what it tells us is like between this quantity and this quantity, that the firm gets basically lower costs by increasing output. So we call that economies of scale. Okay, that's one way to think about it. And this would be to say, like, if we had 2 times the inputs, so we doubled our costs, right? 2 times the costs, but maybe we got 4 times the output. So that means that overall, the cost is going to be the average cost, because this is like the total costs have doubled. The average costs have actually fallen. Then between this range here and this range, it's the constant returns to scale. And that's the idea that, and I'm just going to write that kind of like over here, that if you had 2 times the inputs, which is to say 2 times the cost, and you would get 2 times the outputs. And that means that it's a constant in terms of like the average cost stays the same, right? The average cost is going to be the same here, and it's going to be the same here, and the same here, and the same here. But at a certain point, right, from here over, it's the diseconomies of scale. Now, the other thing that these are sometimes called, besides diseconomies of scale, is like increasing and decreasing returns to scale. And this is called decreasing returns to scale, and this is called increasing returns to scale. And the idea is that are you getting kind of more or less out of scaling up the operations? And for the diseconomies or decreasing returns to scale, it would be like if you doubled the inputs, which effectively means you've doubled your costs, but you only got 1.5 times the amount of output. So that means your average cost is going to go up as you do that, as you expand. So hopefully this helps you understand. Businesses typically want to operate in the economies or the constant returns to scale range. They would definitely not really want to be operating in this too big scale range. Hopefully this helps you. See you next time.